6-point view reviewing of exponents. Now, we will be getting into exponents more with fractions in this chapter, but we're going to review some exponents with whole numbers. But these properties of exponents, which you have been taught in the past, are the same properties. Now, if we are multiplying with the same base, for all of these, besides here and here, my base is an A. So as long as you have the same base and you're multiplying, this becomes adding exponents. A lot of times I try to tell students, think of your order of arithmetic. So you have exponents, you have the division, multiplication, you have adding, subtracting. It's always one step below. So if this is multiplying, one step below multiplying would be adding. A lot of times people see that familiar. Here, this is an exponent to an exponent. Well, one step below an exponent would be multiplying. So you multiply the exponents. This is only the property for the exponent. Here, if I have an exponent, this is actually the same thing. You have to give it to everyone on the inside. I'll often say, don't be greedy. Give it to everyone on the inside. If we have a negative exponent and it's negative on top, we make it into a fraction. This is the same thing as if I had 1 over a to the negative m. If it's negative on the bottom of a fraction, we can move it on top. Remember, anything can be over 1 to make it positive. So a negative exponent moves above and below. When you are dividing, you would subtract. When you're dividing, you subtract the top always minus the bottom. Again, this is just another example of don't be greedy. Give it to everyone on the inside. So right now, first I have to decide what's going on in between these two bases. My bases here is y. They're being multiplied. So if they're multiplying, these are properties that you will have to know. I will not be telling you what they are. You need to add the exponents. Now, if you want to, you can do this to show your work. I'm okay if you just write that as your final answer. Done. Sometimes we'll give you problems where there's more than one thing you have to do. Example here. There's two ways that you can go about thinking through the answer. As long as you get the final answer, I don't care which way you choose to do it. I'm going to make this a positive exponent. This right here, if there's no exponent, this is always the first power. So really, the 2 stays on top of the equation, or the fraction. Just this x squared moves on bottom. And then I also have this x to the 5th on bottom. Now that turned that into multiplying. And that's the same idea as this right over here. So this 2 stays on top. I can add my 2 exponents. So 2 plus 5 would give me 7. So when I'm looking at this, this is a perfect one where I would say don't be greedy. So it might be beneficial if you write your whole numbers to the first power. So in this case, when I write them to the first power, you have to bring this 2 to the x power, the 2, and the 3. But it's with the exponents, not with the number. So this becomes 2 squared, because 1 times 2 is 2. This becomes x to the 8th. 4 times 2 is 8. And 3 squared. Now, if you can, and in this case it's easier to simplify, you should simplify those numbers. So this becomes 4x to the 8th over 9. One problem that is reviewed, but I did not go over in the properties, is any number raised to the 0 power. Any number raised to the 0 power, it doesn't matter what it is, but this whole thing is raised to the 0 power. Whoopsie, is always equal to 1. So this is always equal to 1. Anything raised to 0 power is 1. Ooh, this one looks intense. First, this whole thing's raised to the negative 1. Since this whole thing is raised to the negative 1, I'm going to move that all on bottom. So now this a squared b to the negative 3, that's already down there. I'm going to move over this whole a squared b to the negative 3. Oh, it's actually the same. So that was just this part, moving it down. Now actually, because they're negative on bottom, I'm going to move those to the top. So there's a b cubed here, a b cubed here. These a squareds I'm going to keep on bottom. Now it's multiplying across, so it's a lot like this. Because they're the same base, I can add those together. So this would become b to the 6th over a to the 4th. For f, there's two things I have to do here. I have to combine the s and t, but I also have to take care of this exponent first. This t doesn't have an exponent. I'm going to write a 1 in. Power to a power, you multiply. Power to a power, you multiply. So this becomes s to the 8th, t to the 2nd, times s the 1st, t to the 1st. Again, I'm writing those in so that's easy for you to see. Since these two have the same base, I can add these two exponents. So this becomes s to the 9th, and this becomes t to the 3rd. And last but not least, this one looks intense. But again, this negative exponent, just like how this negative exponent, it flips. It makes the fraction flip. So I'm just going to get rid of that negative exponent. Everything on bottom, I'm going to move to the top. Everything on bottom, I'm going to move to the top. Everything on top, I'm going to move to the bottom. And now I'm going to move these negative exponents. Couple of things here. I'm going to move this r squared to the bottom because that's negative. I'm going to move this r to the first, -1, to the top to make those positive. This s to the 0, that's the same thing as 1. I don't have to write that again. I'm donezo with that. So I'm going to leave that positive s squared on bottom. This t to the first is going to stay on top because it's positive. This t, I'm going to move up top, t3. Now I can combine my exponents. So here, this becomes 1 minus 2. It's the top minus bottom. That gives me a -1. Okay, because whenever you take top minus bottom, you should write it on top. There's no other s's to combine here. Here I'm multiplying, so I can add those together. Now, you should never leave an answer with a negative exponent. So this r to the -1 should move on bottom. Another way you could think about this right here is say, okay, I know that there's more on bottom. My r should end up at bottom. You can take your top minus bottom or bottom minus top. Once you do that subtraction, I get 1, so I know it has to end up on bottom because my r is on bottom. There's more r's on bottom right there. And there you go, reviewing exponents. Have a great, grand, wonderful day.